Our scripture this morning is from John 9. As Jesus was walking along, he saw a man, blind from his birth, and the disciples questioned him.
Teacher, whose sin caused this man to be born blind?
Was it his sin or his parents' sin?
His blindness had nothing to do with his sins or his parents' sin. He is blind so that God's power might be seen at work in him. While daylight lasts, we must do the work of the one who sent me. Night is coming when no one can work. While I am in the world, I am the light of the world.
Then Jesus spat on the ground and made some mud. He rubbed the mud on the man's eyes and said,
Go and wash your face in the pool at Siloam.
So the man went and washed his face. When he returned, he could see.
Aren't we this man's neighbor?
Isn't he the one who used to sit and beg?
Yes, I think he's the one.
No, that isn't the man. It just looks like him.
It's me. I'm the man.
Then how were your eyes opened?
The man called Jesus. He made some mud, rubbed it on my eyes, and told me to wash my face in the pool at Siloam. So I went, and as soon as I washed, I could see.
Where is this man?
I don't know.
The neighbors took the man to the Pharisees. Now the day that Jesus cured the man of his blindness was a Sabbath day, and the Pharisees asked the man again how he had gained his sight.
He put some mud on my eyes, then I washed, and now I can see.
The man who did this cannot be from God, for he does not obey the Sabbath law.
How could a man who is a sinner perform such miracles as this?
The Pharisees could not agree, so they continued to question him.
You say he cured you of your blindness? What do you say of him?
He is a prophet.
The Jewish authorities could not believe that the man had been blind and could now see until they called his parents and asked them,
Is this your son?
You say that he was born blind? How is it then that he now can see?
We know that he is our son,
And we know that he was born blind.
but we do not know how it is that he is now able to see.
Nor do we know who cured him of his blindness.
Ask him.
He's old enough.
Let him speak for himself.
His parents said this because they were afraid of the Jewish leaders who had already agreed that anyone believing Jesus was the Messiah should be banned from the synagogue. A second time, they called back the man who had been born blind.
Promise before God that you will tell the truth.
We know that the man who cured you is a sinner.
I do not know if he is a sinner or not. But one thing I do know, once I was blind, and now I can see.
What did he do to you? How did he cure you of your blindness?
I have already told you, and you would not listen. Why do you want to hear it again? Do you want to be his disciples too?
Listen, you sinner, you are the fellow's disciple. We are disciples of Moses. We know that God spoke to Moses. As for this fellow, we don't even know where he comes from.
What a strange thing. You do not know where he comes from, but he cured me of blindness. We all know that God does not listen to sinners, but if anyone is a worshiper of God and sees God's will, God listens to them. To open the eyes of someone born blind, that is a thing unheard of since the world began. Unless this man came from God, he would not be able to do this.
Who are you to give us lessons?
You were born blind and brought up in sin. You can't teach us. Get out of this synagogue. Out!
Jesus heard that the blind man had been expelled from the synagogue, and he went to find the man.
Do you believe in the Son of Man?
Tell me who he is, sir, so that I can believe in him.
You have already seen him. He is the one talking to you.
I believe, Lord.
It is for judgment that I come into the world, that those who do not see may see, and that those who see may become blind.
Are you saying we're blind?
If you were blind, you would be blameless. But since you claim to have sight, your guilt remains.
Good morning. In a former life, in a skinnier life, in a younger and braver life, I was convinced by some folks to go caving. There may have been a girl involved I was trying to impress. I don't remember exactly, or unless we were married at that point, in which case I don't know why in the world I even did this. But we went caving, and to go caving in West Virginia wasn't sort of like the big caverns that you go into, that you walk into, and they have a well-lit path, and they have a little walking path, and they have anywhere you want to go with brochures, right? This was a cave in which the information we were given was a number, a cave number, and a rescue number to call. And we tell people at home, if you don't hear from us in 2 hours, call this rescue number. This is all true. Call this rescue number in West Virginia, tell them the cave number, and they'll come and get you, right? That's how we did it. So we got helmets, we got our headlamps, we drove out along the highway and found this place to pull off, and were given sort of word of mouth, and we were given a hand-drawn piece of paper that was the internal map of the cave. That's how we knew how to get around. So we walk up to someone's leading us around that has done this before, I guess, and we walk around down in this little culvert, and we're down in there trying to figure out where to go, and Aaron says, well, it's right in there. And I see this hole that's about this big, right? I go, seriously? Yeah, it's right in there. So all 3 or 4 of us, I remember there, one by one, get on our bellies and scoot our way and crawl into this cave that ends up being just a few little tunnels that is not enough for me to stand up in, clearly, that I had to crawl through, and there were parts where, there was like this drop off, and the walls were about this far apart, so I kind of did one of these like scooting along the wall things, hovering above the little creek that was down below. And we get around to this part where there's a little bit of a room, more of a traditional cave idea of this little room, and we say, oh, okay, this would be a great time to turn off the lights and just see, how dark it really is. So we're sitting there, we all turn off our headlamps, and for the first second or two, it's like, oh, this is really cool, and so we all do the maniacal laugh, like, mwah, ha, 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 just so we can hear it echo and not see anything. And it was shocking to me how quickly I needed that light back on. I thought this would be really cool. It was like maybe 3 seconds after we were done doing our maniacal evil laughs that I had to have that light back on. I was recognizing in that moment, if the batteries went out on our headlamps, we would be completely sunk. There would be, almost no way of us getting out. And we'd have to wait for, my mom or whoever had the phone number back in town to call for rescue. The lights came back on. We worked our way out. My heart was racing a little bit, but I got sort of this sense of utter need and reliance on others, of those others that made sure that our headlamps and our helmets were in good condition, that went in the cave before us and actually sketched out the map so that we knew where we were going. And I got a little bit of a sense of what blindness is really like. Not that I would ever claim to really know what that's like. But for our story this morning, Jesus opens the eyes of a man who was blind, and he declares, "I am the light of the world." A man who's blind from birth, who's spent his entire life fully aware of his blindness, of his need for other people, of his reliance for other people. This man is made new. He's given sight. And as a result, the religious
Isaiah
leaders are
61 to
baffled,
6.
and they can't figure out what's
I'm
going
reading from the
on,
New-
and they start to stumble around in the dark. They can't really see this sign that's in front of them. Now, Jesus sums up the whole point of the story right near the end when he says, "I have come so that those who cannot see may see, and those who see may become blind." It sounds a little harsh, but here's what I think Jesus is saying. Those who are blind know they need help. They know they need something. They know they need Jesus. They're fully aware they can't see, and so they're ready. They're waiting for Jesus' healing and Jesus' renewal. Those who can see or claim that they can see, they think they have it all figured out, and really they are unable or perhaps unwilling to recognize or admit that they do need Jesus as well. See, the Pharisees, the leaders, even the disciples, they're concerned about sin. They want to know who sinned. They want to peg the right people as sinners. They want to get it all right and make sure that those who sinned will pay, and they know that they're sinners. Who sinned and caused him to be blind? How could a sinner do this miracle? We know this man is a sinner. How dare you lecture us? You were born in sin from head to toe. Jesus rejects those judgments and throws it all back. Those who want to label others as sinners have the tables flipped on them. The one who was blind was sinless. Those who claimed to see and know it all, their sins remained. Nobody wants to be blind, though, right? It's a state of weakness. It's a state of dependence. The Pharisees certainly couldn't imagine that they would be blind. But this is the nature of the upside-down kingdom that Jesus proclaims. Remember who's blessed in the kingdom? The poor, the meek, those who mourn, those who are persecuted. The reality is that we all need Jesus. We all need some measure of healing, of restoration, of renewal. And that's exactly what Jesus has come for. The scriptures are fulfilled in Jesus. So he reads from Isaiah at the beginning of his ministry, "The Spirit of the Lord is upon me because he has anointed me to bring good news to the poor. He has sent me to proclaim release to the captives and recovery of sight to the blind, to let the oppressed go free, to proclaim the year of the Lord's favor." So the question for each of us today, I think, is, how do you need Jesus? What needs renewal? What needs healing in your life? Because Jesus wants to heal, he wants to renew, but if we think we have it all under control and refuse to recognize our need, we've essentially told Jesus we don't need him. Let's not make the same mistake as the Pharisees. It's really easy to ignore our faults, or if you're like me, to recognize them and assume that you can take them all under control, you can figure it out yourself. Right? But most of us know that getting rid of addictions, bitterness, pride, whatever it is, the list goes on, is virtually impossible by oneself. Jesus' sign is God's work of renewal. Jesus' sign from this morning is God's work of renewal, but it does us no good if we remain blind to our need for healing. In our series, we've been talking about this idea of in relation especially to our vision and mission statement of looking for Jesus signs around us, looking for Jesus signs in the scriptures, and also that turn in which in following Jesus we become signs of God's work in the world. So part 2 of this message is that we need to recognize God's renewal and healing today all around us and participate in it. We need to see and be the signs of God's work. And I think on this point we need to take our cue from Jesus. When the disciples wanted to blame someone for the man's blindness, Jesus did not spend time debating it or even engaging their conversation. He simply saw what was going on as an opportunity for God's glory to shine. N.T. Wright talks about this showing up in the Genesis account of creation too, that chaos was there in the beginning. There was just darkness. And God didn't waste any time asking who caused the darkness, why is it there? Instead, God saw it as an opportunity to create. So similarly, we can take a cue from Jesus in holding back our judgments about why someone is in a place they're in, and simply see it as an opportunity to help out, to offer healing and renewal. Maybe this is a hug or a shoulder to cry on. Maybe this looks like supporting organizations that help those who are in need. This tie, for instance, was a gift from my sister at Christmas, and she bought it from a company that supports ways of ending child trafficking and sex trafficking. And some of the folks who actually make the products are girls and boys who were rescued from child trafficking, and then they create and are able to make a living by making crafts and things like this tie. There's many, many people that sit in darkness into which we can offer the light of Christ. So I offer this story at the end of this message because it just came to me in the last couple weeks. This wonderful story of Christians helping people in need. And it just so happens that it comes from my home church in Lancaster, Pennsylvania. East Chestnut Street Mennonite Church is in Lancaster City, Pennsylvania, and has, in the last couple months, been helping to resettle a Syrian refugee family. And so their story was in the Washington Post. So I'm just going to read a few excerpts from this story from the Washington Post and hope that I can make it through. But you'll help me out, right? When the Church World Service first asked the East Chestnut Street Mennonite Church last year if its congregants would want to sponsor a refugee family, close to 24 signed up. Once the word came that a Syrian refugee family was on their way, someone made flyers with photos of the Al-Hamasna family and distributed them at church so people could see their faces and begin praying for them weeks before they arrived in early January. Maher al-Mahasna, his wife Rhonda, and their 4 young children, ages 12, 10, 7, and 3, lived in Jordan as urban refugees for 3.5 years before they escaped the war, after they had escaped the war in Syria, days after their youngest daughter was born. They had hidden in underground shelters during bombings, and then even when the skies were clear, the children became too afraid to venture outside. Their new home sits on a drab, treeless, alley-sized street less than a mile from the historic city square here, just beyond the downtown galleries, cafes, boutiques, and America's oldest farmers market. But what the city block lacks in aesthetics, it makes up for in what it represents for Maher al-Mahasna: permission to dream again. A towering man in an Adidas tracksuit with a Tom Selleck mustache, Al-Mahasna said he can now imagine a future for his children. He wraps his massive arm around Salam, his 7-year-old daughter, and hugs her close as she recites the ABCs for the group gathered in the living room. He smiles proudly when everyone applauds. On Monday evening, 11 members of the welcome team gathered in their church to learn Arabic. It wasn't a requirement, just something after weeks of communicating by hand gestures and smiles that they wanted to do. The team hired Rhonda to cook them a meal, hoping to give the family a little income while Maher looks for a steady job. They began by learning words for expensive, cheap, near, far, man, woman, big, small, healthy, sick. They practiced some basic greetings and the word for delicious so they could properly compliment Rhonda's cooking. Elias George, a local Palestinian man, translates for Maher. They were occupied by all misery and miserable things around them, and now they feel safe. His dream was shattered. Now he comes here, and he has a dream that anything is possible. They were in the darkness. Now they live in the light. They were in the darkness. Now they live in the light. Jesus is the light of the world. Jesus is the light of the world. He recovers sight for all who are blind, but he also intends that those who think they see may be made blind, meaning they will recognize their need for him. May we recognize our need for Jesus and receive his light, turning our blindness into sight. And may we be agents of healing, bringing light to those who sit in darkness. The light shines in the darkness, and the darkness will not overcome it. Amen.